Kelpieone here on Stainedglasscuts. A while back I made a video called How to Make a Simple Flower from Just Circles. I'd taken the small flower from the video and put it on a stalk I made from brass rod and stuck it in a flower pot. But I wasn't happy with the result. It rotated on the brass rod, making it hard to position, and didn't really catch the sun the way I had hoped. So I cut down the brass rod, did a bit of bending, and voila, the stained glass table flower. And here's how you can make them. First, the colors I'll be using. All the glass is made by Oceanside with a 96 COE, or coefficient of expansion. Because all the designs will need the overlap of yellow and blue glass to produce green, I'll be using 2-inch wide circles of transparent blue topaz and transparent solid yellow for my base colors. Next, for the small 1 1/4 inch circles, I'll always be using 3 circles made from the same blue topaz. This is because I don't see a color combination of my blue topaz with any other color that I really like, except of course when it's combined with the yellow to make the green. The yellow is a different story. I like the way the orange overrides the yellow and the red water glass overrides the yellow, and they look good when combined. So here are the 3 color combinations that we'll make. We'll make one flower just out of yellow and blue. A second flower out of yellow, blue, and orange. And a third flower from yellow, blue, and red. Let's get started. I have all the circles cut, 12 per flower. I've cleaned up the edges of the circles by grinding them on my flat lap. I've also put a link to how I cut circles in this video's description. So here they are, the yellow and blue only, the yellow, blue, and orange, and the yellow, blue, and red. When I lay them out in the kiln, I'll be sure that all of the pieces are pushed up snugly against each other. And the star that forms in the middle, that all the points of the star end up being of equal length. Off to the kiln. Here are our fused flowers. Looking good. Now to make the brass leg. First I'll check to be sure the 1/8 inch brass rod fits through the holes in the center of each flower. This one is very snug. And these two are slightly too small. Sometimes this happens and sometimes it doesn't. Why the variance? I don't know, but no problem. I have a 1/8 inch core bit, a diamond core bit, and we'll just simply enlarge the holes. What's nice about this design is that the glass is dimpled on both sides, both the front and the back, which makes a nice guide for the bit. So a little bit of water. You never want to run a diamond bit dry. And you can see how easily this can be done. Okay, we've got all of our holes drilled. The brass rod fits nicely in each one. Okay, ready to make the leg. I've cut 7-inch lengths of brass rod and have threaded both ends using a 6-32 NC die, which is what's in here. Threading brass rod is easier to do than you might imagine. I have a video on how to do this, and we'll put a link to it in the description. I've threaded the rod until it protrudes 3/8 of an inch from my die holder. This ends up producing threading that's roughly 3/4 of an inch long. Each piece of rod will make 2 flowers. So the first thing I'm going to do is mark the middle. And the reason for marking the middle is twofold. One, it'll give us a place to begin our bending. And second, once we have the legs complete, it'll give us a place to cut them apart. So then, what you need to use is anything that's roughly 3 inches in diameter. This is just slightly less than that, but just fine. You know, I've used a wine bottle. This happens to be a propane tank. You know, pretty much anything that meets that 3-inch diameter specification works. So I'm going to start by centering the mark on the tank, and I'm going to apply downward pressure. Now here you don't want to push on the threads. And what we're going to do, we're going to try to continue that bend. You can see I'm starting to get the bend. And once we get it going, again, we can use the cylinder or the wine bottle or whatever you're using to continue the bend on around on both sides. What we're going for here at the end of the day is roughly a U shape. Sometimes it's almost easier to do it with your hands. Okay, now you see, I'm not really making the U all the way around, but just doing kind of a rough U. Now, where I have it centered with my mark, I'll take my cutters and I'll cut it apart. And watch wherever it goes. All right, so we've got the start of our 2 rods. I'm going to grind these ends smooth, and we'll move on to putting this onto each of the flowers. To finish the 3rd leg of the flower, we'll be using one 6-32 solid brass nut, one 6-32 brass acorn nut, which is sometimes called a hex cap nut, 2 number 4 solid brass washers. These washers have a 1/8 inch hole in the middle and are 1/4 inch in diameter, and a 1/8 inch wide plastic end cap. First, thread on the nut, and we'll bring it on down just until it starts to bind a little bit. Then we'll take one of the washers and then put the rod through the back of our flower, add a second washer, and at this point I'll take my acorn nut and apply a tiny little bit, probably overkill, a little bit of crazy glue, and then we will tighten it on to the end of our rod. And I'll just make sure that it's nice and snug, my little wrench. Next, we'll go to the back of our flower and apply a tiny little bit of our crazy glue to the back of the flower. and tighten down the nut. Now what we're going to go for here is to center this between two of the lower petals on our flower. And I snug it up pretty tightly. And again, check to see that it's centered. Next, I'll take a tiny drop of crazy glue. This is probably overkill, but I'll put a little tiny bit on the end of our brass rod and push on our end cap, spinning it as I go to evenly spread the crazy glue. And so there we have our second flower ready to go. I'll finish up the last one and be right back. And here are our 3 finished stained glass table flowers. Please consider liking and subscribing, and thanks for watching. Cheers!